Why are we so drawn to these figures whom we do not know? The face is many things. It's a mirror, it's a mask, but it's always a symbol. Symbols that are with us and yet retain such mysteries. For when we look at these visages, we're struck with their defining eternal quality, that they remain forever in a fine balance of the recognisable and the unknown, with us mortals asking as always, what secrets lie behind those eyes? The enigma of the human being becomes shattered when the private becomes public. As soon as we know more definitive answers, the myth can no longer stand, because we elevate our symbols through their mystery. When all that's unrevealed remains hidden, they're an icon, an emblem, ever able to remain as something eternal. In the age of celebrity culture, the frontal presentation is always open, an action that removes the complex. When its nature is unconcealed ubiquity, its ties to the eternal are broken. Now this is not a symbol connected to anything beyond the immediate, to the earthly delights of the now. And to use such a face within an art piece is to distract from the very symbology of art. Rather than art as something divine above humanity, it's unconsciously suggested that it's improved by the most surface level humanity we have. Instead of seeing a character, we see an actor. We see mortality. Instead of the eternal, we're presented with a silhouette of the present day, aggressively asserting its dominance and importance over everything grander than we are. But isn't this the nature of our species? How can we replicate that era which is trapped within time, so distantly connected to us? Surely these images innately carry with them a transcendental edge, because life then seems so alien to now. We look at these people as symbols because they're not like us. The very nature of the human being was a symbol in and of itself. Now, we're so aware of one another that it becomes so difficult to employ such sacred techniques. Difficult, but not impossible. Sometimes a face is enough. It wears all that we need to see. Its past encases it. It's enshrouded in its history. It's the face that more often than not wears the person, and it says so much more than words ever could. The face is emotion, and oftentimes to communicate such emotion, it must be separated from everything else. Like in this sequence from 12 Years a Slave, the face is separated in a block of time. The very passage of time itself in such a removed sequence separates the human emotion from time itself. This brief moment becomes separate from the earthly experience. It becomes eternal. And some faces are just enough. They tell us so much about who we're looking at. They hold every character's sinister intention. They signify the complete loss of hope. In silent cinema, it's much easier to find those faces that carry such weight and importance, because without sound, you're completely devoted to the image. An entire character can be built purely on how the face alone looks. And I'm astounded that in a visual medium, we speak of acting, we speak of performance, but so often do we ignore the fundamental aspect of how a person looks. The basis of the visual arts was built from this. Their base presentation is their humanity, and it's that we aim to transfigure into a theme, into a message that can last forever.
I have abandoned my child.
We think of those faces that carry such solemnity, as though they hold some deep-seated knowledge about the nature of humanity. When examining portraiture and photography of the past, we're presented with people who do not smile, who carry a sobering and deliberate seriousness to their presence, as though they're standing guardian of their own dignity. This gravity upholds the drama of human existence. In cinema, it was perhaps best employed in The Passion of Joan of Arc. A film that's constructed primarily through close-ups, it revolutionized storytelling by revealing the all-encompassing power of the human face, the constant looking upwards, as though invoking God herself, and the inward look, as her eyes glaze over and she resigns herself to her fate. Here the face conveys pure tragedy. The powerful eyes, the vacant expression. The face indicates the presence of something else, something so powerful that the self is overwhelmed by its weight. This depiction of Joan of Arc became one of the most famous images in cinema's history. Even those that haven't seen the film have seen this face. It represents such inward reflective pain that the face becomes palpably more than what it is. It's here that I want to emphasise that it's not merely expression that conveys these themes, but the face itself. If someone other than Renee Falconetti was to take the lead role in this film, I'm confident that it wouldn't have been able to convey the messages that aimed to be made. Because in the Passion of Joan of Arc, her victory must be claimed through her suffering, and such immense drama is erected in a singular and painful visage. It may be so that in this instance, the performance of Renee Falconetti is so timeless because this is all she's isolated to. There are no other performances of her that we have for reference. As far as the world is concerned, she's not Renee Falconetti. She is the face of Joan of Arc. Here the image is tied to the sacred, so that when in Vive sa vie, we invoke the power of the human face once more. And it becomes more meaningful because when Anna Karina gazes upon the image of Falconetti, it's treated with the same reverence as one gazes upon a divine icon. Many artists would dream to have at their disposal faces that could only be utilised for a singular work, that their face couldn't be tainted by the perceptions of their personal lives or reminded of other works, forever tied to one piece. Robert Bresson searched for this constantly in his films. He never utilised his actors more than once, as he did consider them spoiled after they'd been used. He didn't want audiences making associations with actors outside of the piece they were watching. And he didn't consider them actors. He thought of them as models, vessels that had no personal import whatsoever, that they were in and of themselves symbols that were to carry the divine. This is no more evident than in Diary of a Country Priest. Claude Laydu was chosen as the lead strictly for the sensitivity and ascetic nature of his face. This was Laydu's first role, and so at this point, he couldn't be tied to anything else. With that in mind, what do we see? We see passivity. Much in the vein of The Passion of Joan of Arc, Diary of a Country Priest addresses us as a deeply religious film, and a face that can scarcely portray anything of our existence when it persists in the shadow of the eternal.
Cette énorme pente de 2000 ans, elle le conduirait tout droit à cette même place où... Quoi? Qu'est-ce que tu as?
There's no emotion on his face as we suffer through the existence of our realities. How does one exist when it knows it can never see itself as part of the divine in one's own eyes, that it must be separated from it, that only upon death can one become eternal? Our lives are crawling towards their endpoint, that which is inevitable. We tend to find beauty in this solace. Words and expressions are not enough to evoke such depth, although the subtle presence of the self amidst this may be enough to present us with some reasoning. A face whose expression is non-existent, whose presence alone displays the profundity of its soul. And although we are drawn to the boundless melancholy portrayed by the human face, the expression need not always be subdued. We're equally drawn to visages of passion, the expressionistic power of human emotion evoked through malformations. When the face transforms the person into something else not of this world, something monstrous, something possessed. In the work of Andrej Zulawski, the human being is contorted, confronting the audience as they invoke the menacing power that swallows the human soul. These faces, bent and warped, in the throes of agony. They do not hide, and instead become new kinds of symbols. These are not faces that bring forth the inward. These are faces that reflect the hostility of the world around them. Faces part of a world so chaotic that the landscape has merged itself upon them. Whereas the subdued face reminds one of the divine, Kubrick warps the face to show that the world around the characters is so malevolent that it imprints itself upon them, that the human being is overtaken by derangement, that they are connected to a new power, one that's possessive of the human vessel that transforms it to do its bidding. These faces stare deeply into our eyes as we catch glimpses of the shadow that inhabits us both.
Ich bin der Zorn Gottes. Die Erde, über die ich gehe, sieht mich und bebt.
And yet Klaus Kinski's face is in and of itself alien. Deep contours and bulging eyes are enough to transfix anyone onto him. When given the opportunity, it's these faces that by themselves say so much. We're not looking for aesthetically pleasing, we're looking for aesthetic with a capital A. These faces evoke true beauty. They're uncanny and thus bypass the world of the human. They can be innately tied to an eternal image.
I want the opera house. I want my opera house. I want the opera house!
Albert Dieudonne evokes this impregnable stature of his counterpart Napoleon. His face hones the stoicism and heroism so that his mere presence is enough to bring those themes to fruition. Lon Chaney understood the power of a morphable face, making it his signature to physically disappear into his role. The person behind the face must be unrecognizable, for it's this mask wherein all characterization occurs. In He Who Gets Slapped, he's a clown who suffers endless humiliation, and so the face is a symbol of such. There can be no man behind the mask, for the humanity of the man has been all but wiped away. And yet the cinematic perspective differs from that of the painter. The painter can compose an image exactly how he needs to. Light and proportion can be modified to their whim. Cinema has less of this, and so the power of the face is emphasized by a singular technique, the close-up. The close-up remains the primary tool to evoke the full capacity of the face. This is what elevates the importance of anything inside the frame, to make it larger, to heighten its gravitas. A close-up is the way a director grabs your head and forces you to look. In Come and See, the power of the close-up is the power of the face. Elem Klimov's traumatic depiction of World War II is told in its confrontational perspective of the people there. By having all characters addressing the camera, we experience the chaos from a mixture of subjectivities. We stare into the faces of all people involved, and the story is told in the face of the main character. We see it age, the eyes gradually more lost, the life drained from it, as he stares into the eyes of perpetrators, unknowing of the thoughts that lie behind their faces. This is the face of a victim, encapsulated by the trauma of staring at those who cannot help him. For a face works when you can separate it from everything else. A freeze frame of a face should have the story painted onto it. The face of the stalker reveals a person that possesses an unknown truth, one that he knows has bypassed the rest of humanity. Colonel Kurt suggests a man that's been swallowed by the darkness, pondering on its power, ashamed that the rest of the world cannot see it. Harmonica wears the harsh terrain of the desert on his face, as well as the trauma of his past. In Persona, the face is malleable. The story is of the merging of two women's personalities with one another, to the point that their entire history becomes blurred together. And this idea stemmed from the realization by director Ingmar Bergman that both actresses looked very similar. This was the genesis of the entire film. Remove the acting, the lighting, and place a person within a frame. The first thing we're going to read is their face. In Persona, the abandonment of the face comes with the altering of one's own identity. In a series of alterations, one barely becomes the person one once was. Bergman's camera frames the duality of one's personality with the intermingling of two women's faces, culminating in their full fusion, completely indistinguishable from one another.
Sina fuktiga och vädjande ögon. Du tycker han är äcklig och du är rädd.
When we think of the face, we're so drawn to its expression, to the person behind it, when in reality the face is a series of shapes, a degree of symmetry. It's a canvas. But just as the painter prepares his canvas to prime his work, so must be done for our personifying feature. It's just as important as performance, because to stare into another person's face reveals the soul, and certain things can't be hidden away. Now, this isn't to clamour for a world without acting, but just for a while, perhaps we can celebrate the face, the human being behind it all, because the power of the human face is an ode to humanity, how we can take our most simple identifier and still turn it into a thing of beauty, how each and every one can be turned into something eternal.